My maid and I sought shelter from a storm in an old castle, where the queen laid out 20 down quilts on a bed. My maid passed herself off as me, claiming she was the real princess. But what she didn't know was that the queen was looking for a princess with delicate skin for one reason. She needed that skin. Alice, you stupid pig. Can't you walk any faster? You think you're still in the palace? There are no men around, so who are you trying to impress with that delicate little act? My maid Susan grabbed my collar and shoved me hard. The rain poured down in sheets, washing over the ground. I fell right into a mud puddle, my entire body caked in filth. I was a complete mess. Susan clapped her hands and roared with laughter. Look at you, you idiot. Ha ha ha, Alice, you're uglier than the sows in my family's pig pen. Don't just sit there crying. Get a move on. If we don't find a place to stay soon, I'll strip you naked. Susan grabbed me by my long hair, yanked me up from the ground, and dragged me forward. The rain pelted down, a biting, bone-deep cold, but it was nothing compared to the ice in my heart. I never thought Susan could become like this. She had been my most loyal maid, serving me since she was 10. We grew up together, played together, and slept in the same bed every night. At my urging, my mother even knighted her butcher father and showered her with countless gold and treasures every year. Susan had knelt at my feet more than once, moved to tears. Your Highness, serving you is my greatest honor. I swear on my family's knightly honor that I will be loyal to you for the rest of my life. But a butcher's knighthood, it turned out, was worthless. Half a month ago, my older brother went to fight on the border. My father died suddenly, and the prime minister who remained in the capital launched a coup. I escaped with Susan, protected by the palace guards. Susan knew a little combat, and I'd asked her to escort me to the border to find my brother. But I never expected that after only a few days on the road, she would become a completely different person. You know, Alice, you're not a princess anymore. You can't cook, you can't work, you don't even know what wheat looks like. Without your fancy title, you're nothing. Why should I have to serve a useless thing like you? Susan used the gold I'd brought to buy food, feasting every day while leaving me with just a small piece of stale bread to survive. When we found an inn for the night, she took the best room for herself and had the innkeeper put me in the stables. It was only then that I slowly began to realize just how much Susan hated me. All those beautiful memories I cherished were, to her, nothing more than a history of humiliation under my power. Eventually, Susan grew even crueler, forcing me to kneel at her feet to eat. But no matter how she tormented me, I endured it. My father's scepter was still in her possession, the most important symbol of the coronation. I had to find a chance to get it back, then make my way to the north to find my brother. Susan shoved me forward. The rain fell in sheets, stitching heaven and earth together, striking the ground and kicking up a spray like 1,000 tiny arrows. Everything was a gray, blurry mess. Ahead, a massive building loomed in the haze. Susan cried out with joy. It's a castle. We battled the fierce wind, struggling onward. As we got closer, we saw it was a true castle, with tall, gray walls covered in green ivy and sharp, circular spires that pierced the clouds. Susan ran up and pounded on the main gate. The storm raged, and the sound of her knocking was almost completely swallowed by the howling wind, but the gate quickly swung open. An elegantly dressed old woman appeared before us. Oh my heavens, what happened here? The old woman held up a lantern, shining it on our faces. You poor girls. What's the matter? Susan hugged herself, her thin body swaying like a leaf in the wind. We're lost, ma'am. Could you let us stay for just one night? Call me Mrs. White. Come in quickly. Go take a hot bath, you poor children. The old woman welcomed us warmly. Soon, maids arrived to lead Susan and me away to wash up and change our clothes. After changing, I came to the dining hall and realized we weren't the only guests tonight. 3 other beautiful young women were gathered together, chatting. Look, 2 more have arrived. Are you princesses too? Hilarious. There are more princesses here tonight than rabbits in a meadow. Susan walked over, curious. What do you mean? Why are there so many princesses? You don't know? The master of this castle is the famous Duke Kent. Legend had it that Duke Kent was wealthier than kings. They said you could ride a horse for 3 days and 3 nights and still not reach the end of his lands. making his domain richer than some small kingdoms. He was also of noble birth, his mother was a princess, and it was his dream to marry a true princess himself. Countless girls came to his castle every day, claiming to be princesses in the hope of marrying him. Susan's eyes lit up as she listened, and she gripped the girl's arm tightly. He wants to marry a princess? My goodness, I am a real princess. The other girls were dismissive. Oh please. Everyone says that. And what's the result? Duke Kent is still single. Exactly. Look at those rough hands. What kind of princess are you? The princess of a flour mill. The girls giggled. Susan quickly hid her hands behind her back, her face flushing red. She clutched the cloth-wrapped scepter at her belt and let out a defiant huff. I have something to prove my identity. You'll all see soon enough. Right, Alice? Susan shot me a threatening look. I pressed my lips together and avoided her gaze. Susan planned to impersonate me and marry Duke Kent. With the scepter in her possession, if it came down to an argument, the Duke might not believe me. I had to find a way to prove who I was. Duke Kent was incredibly wealthy and maintained his own legion of knights. If I could convince him to send a message to the north, my brother and I could take back our palace. My mind was racing, and I barely paid attention to dinner. The other girls chattered excitedly about how handsome Duke Kent was, and Susan listened, her face beaming with delight. After dinner, Mrs. White led us to our bedroom. When I saw the room, I was stunned. In the lavish bedroom stood 2 exquisite walnut beds, each piled high with 20 velvet quilts. Mrs. White shrugged. I heard earlier that one of you is a princess. Her Highness naturally deserves the very best bedding. After Mrs. White left, Susan shrieked and threw herself onto one of the beds, rolling around gleefully. Oh my God, the dinnerware was made of solid gold. All that glittering gold nearly blinded me. Alice, your palace is nothing but a hovel compared to this. You only use silverware for banquets, right? I have to marry Kent. I have to stay here. Susan leaped off the bed, rushed over to me, and grabbed me by the throat. If you tell Kent that I'm the real princess, I'll give the scepter back to you. Be smart about this, and I'll spare your life and let you run off to the north to find your brother. Her hand was like a vice, squeezing so hard I saw stars and could barely breathe. When I didn't answer, Susan slapped me hard across the face twice. Do you hear me? Answer me, you bitch. Susan slapped me again and again, and soon my cheeks were swollen like dough. It doesn't matter if you agree or not. I'll just kill you. You're just a maid. Duke Kent won't care. Susan tightened her grip on my neck. I struggled desperately, trying to pry her hands away. Just then, the door creaked open. Mrs. White stood in the doorway, holding a lantern. Is something wrong? Do you need any help? Susan flinched and let go. It's nothing, ma'am, nothing at all. We were just about to go to sleep. Mrs. White ignored her, her eyes fixed on me. Susan didn't dare make another move and obediently climbed into her bed. I was just teaching my disobedient maid a lesson. Everything's fine now. Alice, go back to your bed and sleep. Susan's voice was laced with menace. Her combat skills were taught by the captain of the guard himself. If she wanted to harm me, I was no match for her. I had no choice but to climb into my bed. As soon as I lay down, I felt something hard pressing into my back, causing a sharp pain. Mrs. White closed the door and left. I tossed and turned, trying to find a comfortable position. But whatever it was right in the middle of the mattress. No matter how I lay, some part of my body was being poked. Susan cursed in frustration. What the hell are you fidgeting about now? You want another beating? There's something hard under my quilts, I answered meekly. There are 20 quilts, and you can still feel something? My, what delicate skin you have. Are you trying to remind me you're a princess? That even in this state, you're still better than me. Susan shot up in her bed. Terrified, I immediately lay back down, pulled the covers over my head, and didn't dare move a muscle. Susan snorted. Alice, don't force me to kill you tonight. Her tone was cold and full of malice. I knew she meant it. She had tried to kill me several times on our journey. A week ago, as we were fleeing, we came across a skeletal little girl. Susan was wearing my gold bracelet. When the girl saw it, she threw herself at Susan's feet, clutching her legs and begging her for help. "Ma'am, please buy me. I can do any kind of work. I don't want my father to sell me to a brothel." The girl was sobbing hysterically, and for a moment, Susan froze. I knew she was remembering the first time we met. Back then, she had been just as thin and small, kneeling on the ground and bowing her head repeatedly, begging me to let her stay. The truth was, my mother had already chosen personal maids for me, all daughters of noble families with respectable backgrounds. Susan had just been there with her father, who was delivering pork to the castle. She looked up at me, her eyes seeming enormous in her gaunt face, filled with tears. My heart melted instantly. I promised my mother I'd be good for a year, studying, practicing the piano, never disobeying her, all in exchange for keeping Susan at the palace. But now this little girl's big, watery eyes didn't soften Susan's heart. Instead, they enraged her. She tore at my clothes like a madwoman. "You set this up, didn't you? Are you trying to remind me of your charity?" Yes, that's the look. Pity, sympathy, so high and mighty, so arrogant. Why? We're both girls. Why were you born with everything while I lived in a pigsty like an animal? What gives you the right to be so proud? Why? My dress was torn to shreds. A crowd of leering men gathered around us, whistling, making lewd comments, and gesturing obscenely. Susan laughed triumphantly. "This is my maid. Anyone interested? For just 1 silver coin, she's yours for the night." The men's eyes gleamed as they surged toward me like hungry wolves, a dozen hands reaching for my tattered skirt. Luckily, a patrol of guards rode by. Fearing they were the Prime Minister's men sent to capture me, Susan quickly dragged me away. But I knew she would find another chance to harm me. My mother often said that jealousy is a poison of the soul. For Susan, the poison had seeped into her bones. There was not a trace of affection left for me. I lay stiffly in bed, waiting until I heard Susan's soft snores. Only then did I slip out of bed and feel under the mattress. I barely had to search before my fingers brushed against a round, spherical object. I sighed in relief. This was the thing that had been digging painfully into my skin. I pulled it out and held it up to the faint light from the window. In the flickering candlelight, I saw an eyeball resting in the palm of my hand. A bloodshot sclera, a dilated pupil, and behind the white orb, a mass of rotting, sticky flesh. I stumbled backward and fell to the floor, clapping a hand over my mouth to stifle the scream rising in my throat. What was going on? Why was there a human eyeball under the bedding? From the other bed, I heard Susan's light snoring. I sat there in a daze for a moment before crawling over to Susan's bed. I felt underneath and, sure enough, found another eyeball. They were identical in size and shape. Even the color of the irises matched. They must have belonged to the same person. So someone had been murdered, and their eyeballs were hidden under the bedding. But why? I stood barefoot on the floor, my legs trembling, my heart pounding. Just then, I heard distinct footsteps outside the door. Click, clack. Leather shoes on the wooden floor. Then they stopped right outside our room. My scalp tingled, and goosebumps broke out on my back. Before my brain could even process it, I moved with lightning speed, shoving the 2 eyeballs back where I found them and scrambling into bed. I had just lain down when I heard a creak. Someone was opening the door and coming inside. I held my breath and shut my eyes, pretending to be asleep. The person walked over to my bed. Because of the 20 quilts, the mattress was very high, level with her line of sight. I felt a cold finger gently touch my eyelid, then quickly pull away. Snoring. As soon as she spoke, I recognized the voice. It was Mrs. White. Mrs. White walked over to Susan's bed and let out a sneer. I've certainly never heard of a princess who snores. After Mrs. White left, I pressed myself against the wall, trying to avoid the eyeball, and curled into a ball to sleep for the rest of the night. The next morning at breakfast, the tableware in the dining hall was even more lavish than the day before. Golden plates with intricate carvings, crystal-clear goblets, and ruby-encrusted candelabras. All the girls stared at the table in a trance. Mrs. White was also dressed more beautifully than yesterday, wearing a magnificent court gown, with a handsome, imposing man on her arm. The girls shrieked with excitement. "Duke Kent! Oh my heavens, it's the Duke!" Duke Kent smiled and waved at everyone. "Good morning, ladies. Did you all sleep well? Wonderfully. So many velvet quilts. It was like sinking into a cloud of cotton. Yes, and the walnut beds. The beds in my castle are also made of walnut. Seeing them felt just like being at home. Your Grace, I had no idea our tastes were so similar. The girls scrambled to answer. Kent listened with a smile, but the longer he listened, the darker his expression became. Soon, even a fool could see he was about to lose his temper. You slept well, did you? And you? You also felt like you were sleeping on a cloud. Kent's face was grim as he stared directly at me. My heart jumped. For some reason, I suddenly thought of the eyeballs under the mattress last night. Before I could speak, Susan rushed forward and shoved me aside. Oh heavens, last night was simply dreadful. I barely slept a wink. There was something hard in the bed. Susan gestured dramatically, her expression exaggerated. There was a hard lump, and it left bruises all over me. It was so uncomfortable. A smile touched Kent's lips. Is that so? Well, that is excellent. Guards, escort this esteemed princess to my chambers. The other girls protested. What does that mean, Duke Kent? Why is she the princess? Yes, I'm a princess too. Why don't you believe me? This girl is so plain. Even my own maids look more like a princess than she does. What did you say? Furious, Susan rolled up her sleeves, ready to fight, but a glance at Duke Kent made her swallow her anger. She unfastened the scepter from her belt and unwrapped its cloth cover. Anyone can lie. You all claim to be princesses, but can any of you prove it? Susan held the scepter high. This is the royal scepter of the Kingdom of Mar, handed to me by my father, the king, on his deathbed. Alice, tell them, am I not the one and only princess of Mar? Susan pressed the tip of the scepter against my chest like a sword. With a little pressure, the silver point dug into my skin. Susan raised an eyebrow, her eyes full of warning. Alice, tell them. A brown-haired girl interrupted her dismissively. Who doesn't have something like that? The sapphire on my necklace is the star of the sea, set for me by the most skilled artisan at my mother's request. I have a crown too, I just lost it on the way here. Duke Kent, a scepter doesn't prove anything. As the girls chattered, Duke Kent smiled slightly and raised a hand for silence. So you all slept well last night? Mrs. White, please bring it in. Mrs. White brought in a golden tray. On it rested a few green peas. Duke Kent picked one up to show everyone. Last night, I placed a pea under each of your mattresses. To be able to feel it through 20 velvet quilts, this lady is a true princess. Only a princess could have such delicate, sensitive skin. After Duke Kent finished, the room fell silent. Everyone had just been falling over themselves to say how well they'd slept. It was true that only Susan had complained about something hard bruising her skin. Amid a sea of envious and resentful glares, Duke Kent took Susan's hand and gazed at her affectionately. Come, let me introduce you to my mother. She is a princess as well. I'm sure you two will have much to talk about. As you wish, Your Grace. Susan was so excited she almost jumped for joy. She playfully lifted her skirt and gave Duke Kent a curtsy. As the two were about to leave arm in arm, Mrs. White suddenly approached the Duke and whispered something in his ear. Duke Kent's expression changed instantly. Are you sure? He looked at me with suspicion. Your name is Alice, correct? You will come with us. Susan started to panic. Mr. Kent, she is just my maid. How is she worthy of meeting your mother? Your Highness, you needn't worry about that. Duke Kent cut her off sharply. Susan didn't dare say another word, but she shot me a vicious glare. The two of us followed Duke Kent across what felt like half the castle, finally arriving at a room in the deepest part of a tower. The attic had no windows, lit only by a single candle that cast a faint orange glow. In the center of the room, a woman lay on a bed with her back to us, seemingly asleep. Duke Kent's gaze softened. Mother, I have found you a true princess. She could feel a pea under 20 velvet quilts. You will adore her skin. The Duchess weakly extended a hand, beckoning Susan to come closer. She wore black silk gloves and was shrouded in a black silk gown. Even her face was completely hidden by a black veil. Susan knelt by the bed, taking the Duchess's hand with a shy expression. Ma'am, I hear you are also a princess. Cough, cough, beautiful girl. Tell me stories of your life in the castle." The Duchess bent over, coughing violently. "Of course, ma'am. I have a huge room just for my beautiful dresses. One is pink, embroidered with pearls from the South Sea. One time my maid, yes, this wretched maid, she stole that pink dress to wear when I wasn't around and ruined the pearls. Alice, come here. How dare you stand? Kneel before me." Susan glared at me with pure malice. I had no choice but to walk over and kneel at her feet. Susan lifted her foot and ground it into my fingers. "This damned maid. Her skin isn't fair enough. In that dress, she looked like a monkey wrapped in pink gauze." A sharp pain shot up from my fingertips. I broke out in a cold sweat, gritting my teeth hard. That dress had been a coming-of-age gift from my mother. Susan had secretly taken it out while I was asleep, twirling in front of the mirror. She was shorter than me, and the hem was too long. She accidentally stepped on it and tore the entire bottom. My mother happened to come to my chambers just then and saw the scene. She was furious. "Guards, drag this wretched maid away." "Mother, look. Doesn't Susan look like a monkey? Ha ha ha, she's practicing acrobatics for me. Oh, Susan, you're trying to make me die of laughter." I laughed hysterically, frantically signaling Susan with my eyes to get out while my mother was distracted. My mother had a terrible temper and loathed presumptuous servants. I was trying to save Susan's life, but all she remembered was me laughing and calling her a monkey. Susan put all her weight onto the heel of her shoe. My fingernails began to crack and bleed, and a sharp pain twisted in my heart. Susan and I had grown up together, spending our entire childhood side by side, yet she always assumed the worst of me. Her soul was like a filthy bog, even the purest jade would be stained with mud if tossed inside. I couldn't hold out any hope for her anymore. "That's enough, Susan." I shoved her hard and pulled my hand back. The pain made me lose my senses, and for a moment, I forgot about the eyeballs under the mattress. I just wanted to expose Susan, to let Duke Kent see the true, vile face of this maid. "Enough. You truly are a princess." The Duchess sat up and began to pull off her black gloves. Duke Kent reached out to stop her. "Wait. Susan, Mrs. White told me you fell asleep very early last night?" Duke Kent's probing gaze swept back and forth between Susan and me. Susan quickly forced a smile. "Oh yes, Your Grace. I'd been traveling all day and was utterly exhausted, on the verge of collapse. The moment my head hit the pillow yesterday, I was out. But that wretched pee woke me up soon after." "Is there a problem, Your Grace?" Duke Kent paused. The Duchess interrupted her son impatiently. "What problem could there be? Who else but a princess would talk endlessly about jewels, clothes, and trinkets? I swear, I don't know what else princesses even know." "Susan, my dear girl, come here." She removed her gloves and raised a hand to Susan's cheek, whispering in fascination, "A princess's skin, oh my skin." Susan froze, staring at the hands on her cheeks, and then let out a hysterical scream. "Ah!" She shrieked and fell to the floor, scrambling backward on her hands and bottom in a pathetic retreat. Kneeling beside them, I stared at the Duchess's horrifying hands, too scared to speak. What kind of hands were those? Raw red flesh dripped with thick ooze and blood. The pink muscles twitched slightly, like freshly skinned pork on a butcher's block. As the Duchess walked forward, she removed her veiled hat. I screamed too, scrambling to curl into a ball in the corner. The Duchess had no skin. Her muscles, blood vessels, and fascia were exposed to the air, a sickening mess of red and white. One look made my stomach churn, and I nearly threw up. Susan wailed in terror. "Are you a witch? A demon? Get away from me, get away." "My dear, that's my mother. This is her home. It's quite rude of you to speak that way." Duke Kent stepped forward and easily subdued Susan, twisting her arms behind her back and pressing her against the wall. He then pulled a small, exquisite silver bottle from his pocket and dangled it in front of her. "This is full of mercury. In a moment, I'll make a small cut on your head and pour the mercury into the gap between your skin and flesh. Then I'll gently pat your body to let the mercury spread everywhere. And then I'll grab the edge of the cut and pull down, and guess what? I'll have a perfectly intact human skin." Susan trembled violently, tears and snot streaming down her face. "I'm not a princess. I'm a maid. I'm an imposter. Please don't kill me. She's the princess. Alice, quick, tell them you're the real princess. Duke Kent turned to look at me. I sat paralyzed on the floor, shaking my head frantically. How could that be? Your Highness, you mustn't joke like that. If I were the princess, why would I kneel to you? Why would I endure your abuse and insults all this time? The king's scepter is in your hands. How could I possibly be the princess? Susan screamed. She is the princess. She's lying. Alice, you bitch, you knew about this all along, didn't you? This was all your plan, all designed to make me die in your place. No wonder you were so cooperative. You vile, shameless whore. You won't be happy until you've destroyed everything for me. Overwhelming fear and rage had driven Susan completely mad. Her face was a mess of tears and mucus, her expression twisted and ferocious with terror. She screamed hysterically, spitting as she recounted all my past humiliations, her teeth clenched, looking as if she wanted to lunge forward and tear my flesh. The ones who wanted to kill her were Duke Kent and his mother, but the person she hated most was me. The human heart is truly a mystery. Duke Kent was stunned. Even the Duchess stopped in her tracks. Oh, good heavens! This is the first time I have ever heard a lady curse so foully. Is she really a princess? Kent, could there have been a mistake? Kent hesitated for a moment, then loosened his grip on Susan. I admit, I've never seen a princess like this. Do you have any other proof of your identity? I'll give you 5 minutes. Given a sliver of hope, Susan became frantic. She stumbled over her words, incoherently recounting our journey. She talked about the coup, how I had risked my life to rush into the back garden and drag her out while she was napping. She described how we had hidden and dodged pursuers on the road, how miserable we were. She even mentioned the jar of gold coins I had brought from the palace, which were now all gone. The gold coins. Oh, right, I still have one last coin in my pocket. Susan pulled a gold coin from her dress and held it in her palm, respectfully presenting it to Duke Kent. But Kent didn't even glance at the coin. He and the Duchess looked at each other, and then both burst into laughter. Ha ha ha, what did I just hear? A princess running to save her maid during a coup. And you were in charge of the gold on the road? The Duchess had no skin, so when she laughed, the dark red muscles on her face contorted, making her expression terrifying. Listen, I may have never seen a princess like you, but I have certainly never seen a maid like you. You have a little bit of cunning, but not much. Not enough to save your life. Can't do it. The Duchess cupped Susan's face with her 2 hands. Susan froze as if under a spell, standing perfectly still. Duke Kent pulled a small knife from his pocket and aimed it at the top of Susan's head. The blade glinted. Susan couldn't move, but tears streamed down her face as she looked at me. Alice, I was wrong. Please save me. You wouldn't abandon me, right? I'm your best friend. You gave my father a knighthood so I wouldn't feel inferior to the other maids. You let me wear your clothes, your jewelry, and attend lessons with you. We weren't just a mistress and a servant. We were friends. You said so yourself. Susan screamed with all her might. Princess Alice would never abandon a friend, no matter what. Princess Alice would never abandon a friend, no matter what. My 12-year-old self placed my hand on top of Susan's. Her face flushed red as she cautiously glanced around. Your Highness, I'm just a maid. How can I be friends with you? Seeing that no one was around, Susan sighed in relief and rolled her eyes at me. Alice, this is so silly. Have you been watching too many plays? Please, Susan, just do it. Fine, fine. Susan shrugged and casually took my hand in hers. Susan would never abandon a friend, no matter what. We knelt together in the garden, swearing an oath to the moon. Our small figures leaned against each other. Our shadows stretched long by the moonlight. I closed my eyes. So Susan understood everything. She had forgotten nothing. She knew I cared for her, and she understood my affection. But she let jealousy fester and grow in the dark corners of her heart, twisting all my good intentions, destroying me, and in the end, destroying herself. I opened my eyes again, and looked at Susan calmly. Alice would never abandon a friend. But Susan, you're not my friend. You are Her Royal Highness the Princess. Susan's pupils dilated. I murmured dejectedly, echoing her own words from the past. Your Highness, I'm just a maid. How can I be friends with you? I never heard Susan's answer. Her mouth hung open, and a meaningless gack sound came from her throat. I saw a silver light travel under her skin. Gradually, her entire body began to emit a faint silvery glow. I turned my head, unable to watch any longer. Duke Kent cheered excitedly. The skin is coming off. Mother, quickly. Clink. A gold coin fell from Susan's body and rolled to my feet. I picked it up and put it in my pocket. While Duke Kent and his mother were busy with the skin, paying me no mind, I slipped out. The castle was huge, but the layout of all castles is similar. I quickly found the kitchen, grabbed a bucket of pine oil, and ran back to the base of the tower. The storm had stopped the night before. The sun had come out, drying the walls and leaves. The ivy covering the wall swayed in the breeze. I splashed the oil on it and lit a fire. The flames shot into the sky. The old wooden tower burned, crackling loudly. Soon agonizing screams echoed from above. Fire! Mother, help me! It burns. Servants and guards began to react, shouting and rushing toward the tower. Heavens, it's on fire! Everyone put it out. Get water quickly. Where is Duke Kent? Where is His Grace? The entire castle was in chaos. No one noticed me. I lifted my skirt and ran. Just as I was about to reach the main gate, a dark figure descended from the sky. A strange yet familiar woman stood before me. She wore a crown and a black gown, its massive skirt shimmering with a silver light. It was breathtakingly beautiful. It was Susan. No, it was the Duchess now. The Duchess spread her hands, smiling. Little maid, did you start that fire? Before I could answer, her expression shifted again. Alice, look, it's me, I'm a real princess now. The Duchess twirled, adjusting the crown on her head. I'm more beautiful than you, richer than you, and stronger than you. She held out a hand, and a flame ignited in her palm. A few seconds later, she quickly waved her hand, extinguishing it. Oh, my apologies. It's a side effect of the new skin. The soul of the deceased lingers for a while. You're a bold one, Maid, daring to set a fire in my castle. The Duchess crossed her arms, looking down at me. She didn't seem to be in a hurry to deal with me. Freshly skinned, she was too proud, too eager to show off her new powers. She told me she was a witch. She had envied the life of a princess so much that she disguised herself and became a maid in a royal palace. The longer she stayed, the more she yearned to become a real princess. Eventually, she used magic to peel the skin from a princess and wear it herself. She succeeded. She became a true princess. But with it came a curse. You know, the more delicate something is, the shorter its lifespan. A princess's skin must be replaced every 3 years. When the time comes, the old skin rots and falls off, leaving me a monster, neither human nor ghost. I can only lie in bed, unable to eat or walk. I wouldn't survive a week. It's truly terrifying. The Duchess shivered. Story time is over. Now what to do with you, little maid? You are the first person to set a fire in my castle. To honor your bravery, I've decided to skin you and hang your hide in my bedroom. That's an honor usually reserved for princesses. What do you think? The Duchess's expression changed again. A princess. I am a real princess now. Alice, from this day on, you will stay in my castle and be my maid. I will spare your life. Now kneel at my feet and pay your respects. The Duchess waved her hands erratically. Oh, get out of my body. I am so sick of this side effect. Now, little maid, come with me. The Duchess grabbed my arm. I looked up at her and asked curiously, you mentioned the curse. What happens if the skin you're wearing isn't from a real princess? It will. Cough, cough. The Duchess's eyes flew wide. Her throat seemed to be constricted. The skin on her body tightened, shrinking until her whole frame seemed a size smaller. She's not a princess. Heavens, what have you done to me? The Duchess thrashed on the ground in agony, but it was no use. The skin twisted and contracted, her limbs flailing and bending into impossible shapes. Finally, her body curled almost into a ball. She lay on the ground, eyes wide, and stopped breathing. I let out a breath and collapsed. You all wanted to be princesses. But don't you know? In fairy tales, there's one rule all princesses must follow. They must be kind. How can someone so wicked ever deserve to be a princess? I pushed myself up and ran back to the tower to help the guards fight the fire. The Duchess was an evil witch, but the others in the castle were innocent. I couldn't stand by and watch them die in a fire I had started. I know that in the real world, relentless kindness can be foolish. But this is a fairy tale, and I am a princess. And a princess's kindness is always rewarded. With my orderly directions, the fire in the tower was soon extinguished. The entire tower was burned to the ground. Duke Kent's body was charred black, and the guards had to struggle to pull him from the rubble. Beneath his body they found a heavy metal door. Everyone was shocked. What's this? There's a cellar here. The lock had melted and warped from the heat, and it broke open with a single strike. The men worked together to lift the heavy door. Sunlight flooded the basement, and a handsome young man shielded his eyes, looking up at us in a daze. Michael? The young man called out, using the guard captain's name. The captain froze, then began to tremble with emotion. Kent. Heavens, you're the real Duke. How many years has it been since you called me by my name? My God, I knew it. That other one was an imposter. The captain rushed forward, and he and Duke Kent embraced tightly. It turned out that 3 years ago, the evil witch had come to the castle. She had skinned the Duchess, disguised herself as her, and had one of her henchmen impersonate Duke Kent. The witch had intended to kill the real Duke, but he had a secret vault where he kept most of his wealth and refused to reveal its location, even under torture. So the witch imprisoned him, tormenting him daily for the information. Duke Kent endured the torture, living in a personal hell, but never broke. I heard your conversation upstairs, Alice. You are a true princess. Thank you for saving me. Duke Kent was incredibly grateful. He not only invited me to stay at the castle and held a grand feast in my honor, but he also promised to send a company of cavalry to the north to find my brother. Alice, do you have a token I can give to your brother? I took the gold coin from my pocket and handed it to him. Duke Kent held the coin up, examining it under the light of the crystal chandelier. Alice, do these letters have any special meaning? The light from the chandelier was blinding. I blinked. Susan, today is my 16th birthday. I can finally have my name put on the coins. I lifted my dress and ran eagerly to Susan. She managed a small smile. That's wonderful. Congratulations, Alice. Look, I added your name too. I excitedly pulled out a gold coin and held it in front of her. AS for Alice and Susan. Isn't it great? Ha ha ha. Alice and Susan. I murmured, my head bowed. It means nothing, Your Grace. It's just an ordinary coin. I downed the red wine in my glass in one gulp and dropped the coin inside. The coin spun in the crystal glass, the letters A and S flashing alternately, reflecting the brilliant light. The end.